The night smelled like citrus and thunder, and somewhere behind the glass walls a clock was melting money. Red numbers bled across a monitor, counting the seconds a dream had left before turning into scrap. Floors gleamed. The building held its breath. In the hush, a pattern kept knocking, soft, insistent, wrong, like a heartbeat that skipped on purpose. People in suits whispered about losses big enough to crater futures, but the real noise was invisible. A rhythm inside the machines that didn't agree with itself. She pushed the mop, listening. Every pass, another flash on a distant screen, the same tremor at the same minute, as if fate were lazy and copying homework. They had models, graphs, consultants with expensive verbs. She had stillness, a notebook, and a promise she once made to always listen for the wobble. When the corridor lights blinked, she looked up, and the pattern finally looked back. The building's heartbeat grew louder the closer she drifted to the places no one cleaned with words. Down in the server stacks, the cold bit polite and even, but the graphs shivered like they were lying. She had learned that truth has a sound, not a bell, more like a hinge that doesn't want oil. A soft complaint repeating until someone listens. The night crew spoke in jokes to keep the dread light, yet the air kept tightening around a number none of them owned. A paper caught under her boot, edges torn, a checksum peeking through the rip like a secret too shy to shout. It was absurd, the scale of it. Storms in space and panic in suits, balanced by her small orbit of cart and bucket. But small things move tides. She traced the stutter again, felt it aligned with the shipment times, and the hush around her rearranged. The problem wasn't everywhere. It was together, between the bay doors and the sky. The storm backed off just enough to hear the math. Pallets towered like patient animals, each tagged with a time that pretended to be random. She remembered factory floors and old machines that sang wrong when paired with cousins from the same batch, the way harmonies can turn on family. The receipts had smiles printed in their fonts, but the ink sweated where it mattered. She looked for the stutter minute and found it whispering across the boxes like a watermark. Inside the building, the briefers begged models to be kinder. Out here, the wind filed the truth down to a razor. If the parts behaved alone but misfired in groups, then the sin lived in the way they talked to each other. She followed that thought until it tapped the door of something she'd rather not open. The boardroom kept pretending it was safe because the furniture was heavy. Power adored thick glass and controlled voices, yet the numbers had their own weather. She stood just outside the door, close enough to hear confidence buckle when confronted by cost. The founder's patience scratched the table. The interim's gaze sliced through slides that didn't know they were confessions. A phrase repeated, acceptable variance, like a lullaby meant to soothe a fire. She watched a droplet on the glass descend beside a graph of red cliffs and realized the same law held for water and money. Gravity is not a metaphor. Somewhere in the floor below, clocks aligned like magnets. The tremor at the edge of her thoughts snapped into a grid. Not random, not noise. A chorus trained to the wrong conductor. Back in the long corridor that always felt like a runway, she let the world compress to pencil and page. The wave she'd been chasing relaxed under her hand, its stubborn skip finally holding still. She sketched what no one asked for. A tiny delay, less than a blink, tucked between neighbors so the chorus would stop eating itself. The building sighed like it recognized the thought. Somewhere, laughter tried to hide a fear of headlines. Somewhere else, a quiet clock rehearsed its mistake. She closed the notebook and felt the old workshop promise move through her bones. Listen for the wobble, then teach it a better song. The elevator chimed. The night gave her one more minute to decide whether to stay invisible or knock on a door that didn't expect her. Night folds differently in the rooms, no one tours. In the security nook, the hum is soft enough to let paper speak. A stack of spiral notebooks sits where a lunch should be, their edges furred by use, their pages patterned like shorelines after a storm. A hand flips through, grids, waveforms, shipment timestamps braided with telemetry beats. And the air tightens, as if the building suddenly realizes it's being read. The patterns aren't drawings, they're arguments, evidence built from quiet. The reader glances toward the monitors, then back, then forward again, measuring the distance between what the system swears and what the margins confess. It's a trespass of a tender kind. To believe that an answer could arrive in pencil when budgets arrive in bullets of light. Outside, rain de-escalates to mist. Inside, a decision gathers. Keep this discovery small and safe, or carry it into a room that pays to be skeptical. The conference screen treats time like clay and truth like a guest. The engineer leans on jargon the way a sailor leans on rail, steadying himself against waves of doubt. He points at models that have never bled and says the word variance until it becomes a lullaby. Evidence without a logo is inconvenient. Evidence carried in from the edges is suspect. She waits near the wall with the people who roll carts, letting the rhythm of the room reveal who is here to listen and who is here to win. Every time the graph resets, the stutter minute winks like a dare. The urge to speak is the same urge to jump from a burning platform to a rope you can't see. Then, the rope arrives in the form of a quiet ally with a tablet, and the room briefly remembers that survival sometimes favors the unfamous. Back in the cold, where machines confess, she spreads the torn printout beside the notebooks and lets the columns settle into a language. Checksums are prayers written in arithmetic, and this one stutters like a throat clearing before a lie. She traces each digit, listening for where the choir goes flat, then isolates a cascade that only appears when shipments land from a particular gate at a particular minute. Alone, the parts sing true. Together, their song buckles, as if a hidden conductor is tapping a rhythm one tick off. The thought is ugly and elegant. Not a bad component, a bad relationship. She follows the thread into vendor codes and gold channel flags, and a phantom walks out of the numbers. A parallel stream where authenticity is a costume. It's not sabotage, not yet. It's greeting a lab coat, a shortcut wearing credentials. It would be easy to run to the loudest room and let the fireworks begin. Instead, she chooses proof that doesn't ask for permission. The building is a library if you know which shelves to climb. Telemetry archives, maintenance tags, badge swipes, receiving docs that timestamp like compulsive diarists. She maps them together and the floor plan becomes a circuit. Current flows along corridors of coincidence until the fuse labeled certainty hums. A test forms itself. No downtime, no drama. Just a crossfade of logs aligned by that stubborn minute, and a filter for clusters arriving under a gilded label. The result is not a crash, it's a choreography of near misses, oscillations that swell when neighbors stand too close. She sketches a cure as small as breath. Stagger the first whisper between them. If she's wrong, the night will swallow the chalk. If she's right, someone's mask will crack. The first run isn't dramatic. That's how truth prefers to enter, without makeup, carrying receipts. Lines that used to hiss settle into a repeatable hush. When entries with the golden badge are isolated, peaks that pretended to be weather now rise on command. The skeptic leans in despite himself, surprised by how ordinary the evidence looks. The liaison's smile holds too long. The number that kept the building awake begins to shrink inside projections as if embarrassed. In the quiet, she hears an old lesson polish itself. Some problems aren't strong. They're synchronized. Break the handshake and the storm forgets your name. She closes the notebook, not in triumph but in readiness, because answers make enemies before they make allies. The night has given her a map and a key. The morning will ask for a door and a lock to fit them. Morning doesn't arrive so much as negotiate, a dim bargain smeared across the windows. The room smells like burnt coffee and the kind of confidence that prefers slides to evidence. A voice, cool as a scalpel, asks for proof that doesn't lean on luck or anecdotes, proof that can survive a courtroom in a launch pad. The engineer stiffens. The liaison smiles without heat. The night worker keeps her gaze on the pattern that refused to be random. Pride flares, then recedes. There's no victory in being right if the building still bleeds. She outlines what the system already recorded. The precise minute, the clustered arrivals, the alignment of small truths that form a large one. No shutdowns, no theater, only the humility of logs braided together until they sing the same song. Silence follows, heavy but honest. The scalpel nods once. The test will speak, or they will pay to ignore it. Proof, when it wants to be believed, borrows the architecture of ritual. They light up a sandbox built from their own history. Weeks of telemetry, months of shipments, tiny fingerprints of every decision that thought it could pass unnoticed. She threads the inputs with a careful hand, not adding, only arranging, like turning a room so its windows face the sun. The first pass is a rehearsal. Isolate the gilded arrivals. Watch the oscillation swell as neighbors echo neighbors. The second pass staggers the handshake by a breath, and the chorus forgets how to fight itself. Doubt loosens its tie. No alarms, no heroics, only the relief of math behaving in public. Around the table, poker faces practice neutrality and fail. Somewhere down the hall, the building's heartbeat drops a beat and finds a steadier one. The ritual ends where it should, not with applause, but with the need to know who kept the lights dim. The objection arrives, dressed as caution, polite in tone, but heavy with consequence. A defect, this specific should reveal itself when isolated, the argument goes. If not, the conclusion must be impatience masquerading as insight. She doesn't push back with volume, only shows the parts singing alone like angels. Then brings them into the choir, where harmonies curdle. Phase meets phase and locks like teeth. The sum becomes a problem the pieces never promised. It is an intimacy issue, a conversation wired wrong. The room leans in despite reluctance. Numbers don't love politics, but they endure it. The display holds steady as an accusation. Heaviness rises from the vendor corner and tries to take the form of professionalism. She meets it with a simple translation. Together, they synchronize to a flaw, and the flaw is contagious. The last refuge of doubt is time, and time has already kept records. Truth changes the air before it changes minds. The cluster sings wrong on command. The phase lock rising like a tide that forgot to stop at the shore. The fix is humble. Fractional delays, staggered wake-ups, a choreography that gives neighbors room to breathe. But humility can be the loudest revolution. She sketches a rollout that costs nothing the system doesn't already carry. Firmware nudge here, initialization offset there, a guardrail against a chorus turning cannibal. Resistance searches for purchase and finds only its reflection. An audit trail that refuses to blink. The executive, with the scalpel, asks for scope and timing. The engineer answers with steps he didn't invent, but now believes it. The liaison offers congratulations the way a man offers flowers to a closed door. What matters is that the model stops screaming when the stagger holds. The room exhales, and the building seems an inch taller. Proof is rarely the finale. It's the fuse that reveals where the fire meant to hide. They rerun the last week as if the past could be persuaded to testify, and it does with gratitude. The savings calculator retreats from the cliff. The launch window reappears like a coastline the fog had borrowed. Gratitude bumps against pride in tight quarters. Applause would be indecent. Relief is permitted. The night worker gathers her notebook as if it were an instrument after a brief concerto, eyes on the corridor that returns her to anonymity. But anonymity is a door, not a wall, and it has hinges that creak when open. Somewhere behind tempered glass, a message thread goes quiet. Somewhere ahead, a headline sharpens its knives. She pockets the pencil and chooses the only direction that ever made sense. Forward, into the room where results are louder than names. Countdowns turn courage into math. The test bay wakes like a beast that believes in procedure, lights stepping up through amber to white, rails humming, the floor trembling with a promise it might break. A voice lists safeties. Then the list shortens. A second voice cuts in with the kind of calm that comes from fear rehearsed. The number everyone pretends not to love. The cost of failure hangs in the room without screens. She feels the stutter minute approaching as if time itself were a machinery fault. Models flash green by habit, yet the heartbeat of the cluster twitches in the wings, a wrong drum waiting to be invited on stage. She tightens around the small plan she carried from the margins. A breath between neighbors, a pause that costs less than a word. Near the glass, faces harden into coin. Near the floor, pencil mark on a note glows like a fuse. It begins with a shiver in the graph. Then the room flinches. The cluster spins up, polite for a breath. Then the lines lean toward each other like co-conspirators and lock. Alarms don't scream. They insinuate, thin needles of sound searching for skin. Someone says the word, abort, and someone else says, hold. And between those syllables, the budget loses another year of someone's life. She knows this music, the echo chamber where neighboring signals teach each other to fail. Her plan isn't noble. It's small and exacting, a wedge in the hinge of a door that keeps slamming on fingers. She looks at the clock, and at the minute that has always lied. Then, to the tablet that wasn't designed for anything heroic. The floor trembles harder. The founder's knuckles blanch against his cane. The scalpel's voice arrives without panic. If you have it, use it. Improvisation is just preparation that refused to introduce itself. She opens the interface Camila tunneled into the maintenance layer and finds the buried flag, shy but present, a hidden switch that lets rhythm learn manners. Her fingers hover, then commit. A fractional delay so slight it feels like a whisper between twins. The room doesn't clap. It holds its breath as though lungs were liability. The cluster fights the idea, surges, sulks, and then the wave breaks on a beach it didn't see until now. Lines that were becoming cliffs flatten to thoughtful hills. Somewhere a technician remembers to exhale and pretends he didn't. The number that threatened to become a headline steps back from the microphone. She doesn't look for faces. She listens for the wobble, now a memory fading into the kind of silence you earn. The storm in the building changes key and calls itself weather again. Relief isn't quiet. It's a chorus swallowing a scream. The test proceeds under new choreography. Each unit waking with the grace of a staggered dawn, the system remembering how to cooperate with itself. Numbers wander back towards sanity. The room practices casual while clutching gratitude in whitening knuckles. She feels the aftershock of risk in her joints, a delayed tremor that confesses how close the future came to shrinking. The founder lowers his cane an inch, as if the floor has returned. The scalpel sheathed itself in a nod. Someone mutters something about paperwork. Someone else starts a log that will later read like a fable about almost. She closes the makeshift control with the care you give to endings that might be beginnings. The cluster hums, still complex, still capable of harm, but governed now by a kindness measured in tenths of a second. The aftermath tastes like metal impossibility. Status boards stop impersonating cliffs. Projections loosen their chokehold. The word recoverable acquires weight. People begin inventing versions of the moment that make sense for their mirrors, but the data is indifferent to theater. It prints the truth in graphs anyone can read, a breath stitched between neighbors, and the storm forgot its map. She lets the room pivot to tasks, audits, firmware notes, chain of custody, because victory is maintenance wearing celebration's jacket. She stows the pencil, the tablet, the little courage that always looks ordinary from the outside. Somewhere a headline loses an adjective. Somewhere a night school application grows new teeth. She turns toward the corridor that made her a witness, and now makes her necessary. The building feels different. as if its foundations heard what stillness can do when someone finally trusts it with the mic. Morning turns the building transparent enough for rumors to see themselves. A headline slips across phones like an oil sheen, asking if a miracle fix risked catastrophe, if unauthorized hands nudged sacred systems. The story prefers drama. It trims the method and fattens the myth. In hallways that once overlooked her, eyes now register, and then quickly pretend they didn't. She keeps moving, because movement is the only grammar some truths respect. The graphs continue their quiet apology, stable and almost embarrassed by last night's panic. But praise arrives threaded with traps, and she can hear the teeth in every thank you. The company wants a hero it can control, or a scapegoat it can invoice. She chooses neither, returning to work like a witness who refuses to testify for spectacle. The storm outside is gone. Inside, another gathers, made of policy, narrative, and the need to own relief. Spin is a science with softer math. In a small room that favors neutral paint and plausible deniability, a voice suggests that protocols exist for a reason, that exceptions deserve names that can be deleted. The story is simple when told forward. A risk, a fix, a result. Told backward, it becomes consent sought retroactively. Ownership reassigned to the nearest resume. She listens through a door cracked by accident or intent, hearing compliments sharpen into cautions, hearing the word janitorial used like a shrug that cancels brilliance. But Spin forgets that logs keep better minutes than meetings. The numbers won't testify about ego, only sequence. She pockets another sticky note, the one that says where the first lie will try to live. Dignity is not a headline. It's the decision to stay exact while others audition for a narrative. The hallway confrontation arrives dressed as courtesy. A smile suggests collaboration while the subtext drafts blame in bullet points. She's invited to consider how fragile reputations can be, how gratitude might look like silence, how easy it would be to misinterpret last night as luck instead of literacy. She does not bargain with her own absence. Instead, she offers the only currency that won't inflate: the audit trail. Timestamps, offsets, credentials routed under supervision. The room without walls grows spectators who pretend to be plants. Someone clears a throat, hoping to water down the moment. The confidence that once ignored her now tries to domesticate her. She declines the leash with a small sentence about simple cause and effect. It's not defiance, it's physics. The smile falters. The hallway remembers it is, after all, a corridor, not a courtroom. Power rarely apologizes. Sometimes it aligns. The engineer steps into the space between convenience and truth, lending his signature to the evidence. He recounts the steps without poetry. The minute, the cluster, the staggered breath, the collapse of the wave. Voices that would rather debate style than substance lose altitude. The room learns a new geometry where contribution is measured in clarity, not job titles. She says little. The work is louder than she will ever choose to be. The relief from last night returns, thinner, now but steadier. As if the building has decided to risk decency. A request forms. Document everything. Publish internally, remove names from the method so the fix can travel faster than bias. Agreement clicks into place like a well-machined part. Outside, the sky brightens just enough to be believed. Guardrails arrive with signatures and spine. The order is brief, unsentimental, and surgical. Full audit. Chain of custody freeze. Restitution pathway is explored. Non-retaliation. Explicit. The words change the temperature of the air. Fear, which had been shopping for a scapegoat, pockets its wallet. She feels the weight redistribute from her shoulders into a system that might actually be learning. There will be noise. There always is when truth asks for receipts. But the road is marked now. She thinks of classrooms she couldn't finish, and of workshops where wisdom smelled like oil and patience. This isn't vindication. It's permission to keep working where she was always working. As the building exhales, she allows herself a private promise. If the door opens, it will open for others too. The number that once threatened futures now funds them. Morning turns purposeful, the building shedding last night's adrenaline for the long discipline of correction. Crates open like confessions. Components step into quarantine under lights that feel less like judgment, more like hygiene. The fix is boring by design. Offsets committed to firmware, boot orders rewritten, clusters taught to breathe before speaking. It's the kind of work that never makes a headline and saves empires anyway. The mantra from an old workshop trails the air. Listen for the wobble. And suddenly it isn't poetry, it's policy. When the first wave of units spins up in staggered dawns, the graphs don't cheer. They simply fail to panic. That absence is its own music. Corridors that once carried rumor now carry checklists. Doubt still lingers, but without teeth. The numbers took those, and in the quiet between tasks, a thought blooms. Endurance is just courage with a calendar. The meeting where money apologizes without saying sorry lives in a room that loves the word mutual. Documents stack into a skyline of clauses, and the air smells faintly of ink and self-preservation. Evidence takes its seat first. The minute, the clusters, the collapse when breath is introduced between neighbors. Numbers don't raise their voices. They simply refuse to leave. Negotiation becomes arithmetic with manners, credits, restitution, a corrective pipeline that can't be spun into charity. The polished story of inevitable failure phrase. A narrative that once leaned on prestige starts borrowing humility. No one admits intent. Everyone agrees on oversight. It isn't justice with trumpets. It's a ledger put back in order. When the signatures land, the room exhales the cautious relief of a bridge that just proved itself under load. Change rarely survives, if it only lives in labs. By afternoon, the fix is teaching itself to strangers. Training decks shed acronyms for verbs. Posters trade hero myths for handholds. Stagger, verify, sign. In workshops and break rooms, tired faces reanimate as they realize failure wasn't fate, just bad choreography. The new protocol travels light, a timing nudge small enough to fit in memory, big enough to redirect storm. She watches technicians claim ownership of the method, mark up the margins, fold it into habits that will outlast names. Somewhere a printer thumps out laminated cards. Somewhere a skeptic nods without telling anyone. The building feels wider. Corridors enlarging to include voices that used to echo back unanswered. None of it glitters. All of it works. The window returns not as a gift, but as a schedule reclaimed. Range controllers speak in clipped kindness, letting the timeline back into their voices. Simulators run like weather, deciding to be reasonable. The array that once flirted with disaster now behaves like a team with manners, each unit greeting the next with a beat of grace. In the quiet before the official word, she dials a number that still smells like oil and patience. The voice on the other end doesn't need details to understand the shape of a victory. Advice travels the same way it always did. Keep the tool sharp, keep the rhythm honest, keep your name out of the way of your work. The call ends. The alert arrives. The window is green. Dusk polishes edges that noon ignores. The building hums at a pitch that means readiness, not bravado. Final rehearsals unspool without drama. Checklists flirt with poetry in their precision. The risk ledger no longer stalks conversations. It rides quietly in their pockets, tamed. She walks the long corridor where stillness first spoke and hears only the sound of work being what it claims to be. No parade waits at the end. That's fine. Recognition that arrives too soon can ruin the muscle that did the lifting. Tomorrow will demand cleaner courage. Tonight grants the rare permission to be ordinary in a place that almost forgot how. The lights dim a fraction. The horizon keeps its promise. The future makes room. Morning arrives with the ceremony of verdicts. The boardroom rehearses neutrality, while the air sharpens around the center table. where printouts sit like patient witnesses. The story tries to enter wearing politics, but the logs won't accommodate costumes. The sequence is plain. Shipments that always chose the same minute, clusters that copied each other's mistake. A fractional mercy stitched between neighbors that turned a roar into breath. What remains is the human part. The corridor smiles that hid calculations, the emails that sounded like gratitude and read like escape plans. Silence begins its slow rule over the room. She does not perform. She places the timeline down and lets causality speak. The founder leans forward as if closing distance could close time. The scalpel's voice is soft, which is how sentences carry longest. When the liaison begins to explain himself, the graphs answer instead. An explanation is suddenly smaller than consequence. The defense is a familiar genre, the fog of complexity, the tyranny of deadlines, the noble lie of industry standard. But the room has lost its appetite for mythology. Pages flip with the sound of opportunity costs. The model that once screamed now hums, because of a fix that wasn't supposed to come from the margins. A clause buried in a contract floats up like a guilty buoy, pointing toward a supplier channel that wore the word gold to distract from the brass. She watches not with anger, but with the patience of math, which always knew the ending if anyone had asked. The founder's disappointment is a weather system. The scalpel becomes a blade only in its precision. No one shouts. Truth drains glamour from the wrong story until it collapses under its own costume jewelry. There's at last room to choose what survives this day. Judgment doesn't need volume. It needs verbs. The directive arrives with edges. Disclosure to regulators. Restitution escalated. Supply pipeline revalidated under new eyes. Then a turn no one rehearsed. An offer extended across hierarchy. A position that would convert witness to architect. She feels the lure and the trap braided together. The chance to shape the rhythm from the inside. The risk of being turned into a mascot. The answer forms where promises live. Not in titles, but in doors opened for others. She names her condition without ceremony. A fellowship for workers who live in the margins of brilliance, night school funded, time protected, paths that don't require permission to begin. The room doesn't know how to applaud without clapping for itself, so it doesn't try. The scalpel's nod is enough. The founder's exhale sounds like infrastructure. Somewhere, ambition chooses usefulness over spectacle and finds it fits. The pad waits the way thresholds do, calmly, with all the gravity in the world pretending to be still. Procedures advance like careful music. Each checklist item is a note the future recognizes. She stands behind glass with the people who understand that some victories are borrowed from those who taught you to listen. The screens show a sky no longer haggling. The chorus that once ate itself now paces its breath, each unit waking with grace, the whole listening to the small kindness inserted between neighbors. Countdown becomes ceremony and then confession, admitting how close they came to learning the wrong lesson. She doesn't pray. She audits the rhythm and finds it honest. The number that once threatened to define them is replaced by another. Velocity climbing in a quiet that is not silence but agreement. When the fire finally writes its signature across morning, it spells a word she recognizes. Earned. After the roar, the world remembers to breathe. The building's echo softens into the kind of quiet that keeps rather than erases. Congratulations become tasks again. Tasks become a future that doesn't apologize for being possible. She walks the corridor that first taught her the shape of a wobble and lets the floor shine for itself. Recognition has a new costume. Not a spotlight, but a badge that opens different doors and a program that will name other names before hers. She thinks of a workshop that smelled like oil and patience, of a voice that said to listen until the truth introduces itself. In the elevator's mirror, she sees not a before and after, but a person who translated stillness into policy. When the doors open, a cart waits as always, and beyond it, a room that now expects her voice. She smiles at the ordinary, which is what heroism looks like when it's done right.